Hello, you alright, bro?
You alright, Mark?
Yeah, good, thanks. Sorry I'm late, the traffic was a nightmare today.
No worries, did you bring the milk?
I did get the milk, we got the coffee and the water.
Yeah, let's get it on the go.
Let's get it on the go indeed, thank you very much. Have you done your own work?
I did. I found it useful. I think, you know, it was the grounding exercise, wasn't it, that Paul Nairn had set out for us to do on the last episode, the trauma episode. Grounding is something that I do most days anyway. It's something I do regular with my clients because it is a really good strategy and technique to use. This one was slightly different because Paul getting used to relaxing the pelvic area, concentrating on that was took a little bit of getting used to, and there was parts where he'd asked us when we had our eyes closed to move them from left to right, which took again just a little bit of getting used to, but like any new sort of skill, it takes practice. But yeah, no, overall found it useful. Yourself?
Yeah, it's similar really, Bri, you know, and as you say, you know, use those sort of grounding techniques with clients quite often, and I do use grounding techniques in my my day-to-day life anyway, but it was interesting actually because I found myself using that technique that Paul talked us through, you know, about looking from left to right, I think it was 6 times, and first of all it was interesting because I committed to it, you know, so I was trying to do it every morning, but sometimes it's that thing, isn't it, as we always say, you know, we work on habits and routines, don't we, and just trying to remember to do it, sometimes I felt like, oh, I've forgotten my homework today.
Definitely, and I think that's one of the things, isn't it, you know, as therapists we ask our clients to do, because we know it works, we know there's evidence, it's proven that these techniques work, but asking somebody to go away and practice it every day, you know, twice a day sometimes, it can be quite challenging to do, to get used to adding it into your routine. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah, so it feels part of your routine. It almost feels like you don't feel your old self, shall we say, until you've done it. It can take a bit of time, can't it? Yeah, I definitely felt like that with this, trying to do it, like commit to it every morning. But you know what was interesting as well for me, something that come up was using it in situations in, like, you know, across the week as well, like sitting in traffic was a good one.
Like today.
Like today. Exactly like today. You know, sometimes I wouldn't use the word road rage, but it was a bit, you know, getting frustrated in traffic and just getting annoyed with myself really, in time management and whatever you call it. And yeah, just using that as a kind of way to just retake control of my body and my muscles. And it's funny you say about that, the pelvic area part of the activity, because it's unusual, isn't it? That's something that we wouldn't, you know, it's not something you'd do unless you were really kind of intentionally, you know, planning to do it, shall we say, to try and relax that area of your body. And yet I did find that a little bit unusual, but at the same time I did find it was making a lot of sense as I was doing it, you know what I mean? So it was helpful.
Yeah, no, it was good.
Okay.
Yeah, on to
We've
today's
done our
episode.
homework. I feel like we're 2 good boys there doing our homework.
Yeah, definitely.
Should we get ourselves set up?
Yeah, let's go.
Let's do it. Hello, my name's Mark.
Hi, I'm Brian, and welcome to the Therapy Shed podcast.
Hello, Brian.
Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's nice to see you again.
And you, another week?
Another week in the shed. You know, a week in the shed feels like a year.
It does, doesn't it?
Oh,
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I know it's a good thing.
Coming out feeling rested and refreshed.
That's exactly what I was going for, Brian.
Recharged.
It is a haven, and I say this every time we do a podcast. But how you get any work done in here is beyond me, I must say, because it's very relaxing space.
It is. You know what? Sometimes it's good when we do these podcasts, because sometimes I forget to appreciate how relaxing of an environment it is to work in, and yeah, it's good. I like when I have people in here, because I feed off the energy of the different people that that come in. So how's your week been?
I've been doing okay, thanks. Yeah, I've had a nice week. I've gotten myself exercising again, so I've been doing bits and pieces there, which felt like a bit of an achievement really, just to kind of get myself a bit of motivation back, do some exercise. So I've been lucky I've started doing a bit of that again. Looking forward to this podcast. Another very special guest coming on today.
Yeah, excited.
So really excited about that. So yeah. Overall, mustn't grumble.
Good.
How's your good self?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm relaxed. I'm good. Busy as usual, but yeah, no, I'm good. Looking forward to today's podcast. And I suppose on that note is saying hello to our friend Nik Voller. Hello.
Hi.
Welcome, Nick.
Hi.
Welcome to the therapy shed.
It's lovely in here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's chilled and relaxed. Yeah.
Good. That's the vibe I'm looking for.
Definitely. You're getting a lot of compliments about your shed, aren't you?
I am.
Is this basically just a marketing device for your people to visit the Haven? I would highly recommend it.
I should open it. It's like do a little tour. People can come and do a tour of the shed.
Like it.
It lasts about 30 seconds, but
what a 30 I told you that 30 seconds would feel like a month. I'm telling you.
yes.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Nick. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, doing well. A little bit nervous, but
That's okay.
It's okay.
Hopefully by the end you'll feel more relaxed and calm, because that's what most guests and clients feel.
Well, and ourselves as well.
Yeah.
That's certainly my experience. We've shared this on earlier episodes of the podcast. Feeling like, you learn and you're challenged and make mistakes, and you, I suppose, like we do in therapy with clients, you kind of work with your anxiety, and recognise it.
It's about being real as well, isn't it? It's
Definitely.
about, it's normal, isn't it, to feel a little bit nervous sitting down and with a microphone in front of you and knowing you're being recorded. I think when I listen back, and I think I've said it before, but when I listen back to our first 1 or 2 episodes, I can hear the nervousness in my voice. But the more I do it, the more it just feels normal now.
So, before we get into the episode, shall we say, we have got some questions we'd like to ask you, Nick. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Brill. So these are questions we ask all of our guests, and of course in the first series of the Therapy Shed podcast, Brian and I asked them to each other. So, are you ready?
Yeah.
Without further ado, so we've got 10 questions. So, question 1. What is your favourite word?
Sparkly or sparkle.
That's a nice word.
That's a great, yeah.
Sparkly.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think, I don't know, jazz hands and smiles. Yeah.
When you say that, I can almost see sparkle in front of you.
Yeah, and I kind of see the word like that and kind of going do, 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 do.
Yeah, definitely.
Glistening, yeah.
There's a lot of imagery to that word, isn't there?
That's it. Yeah, as soon as you
It's
said
all
it.
positive imagery as well, I would say.
Yeah, all nice colours and
Great. Okay, question 2. What is your least favourite word?
Dread.
Okay.
It's quite a heavy word. It makes me tummy feel a bit like ooh. And I have that feeling sometimes, and when somebody says that word, I guess it maybe takes me straight to that tummy feeling that I have. It sounds like dead as well, doesn't it? Dread, dead.
Yes.
One syllable, final, horrible. Don't like it.
Yeah, no, I can see that. No, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Do you know what? I never thought of that word when I answered these questions. But that would be up there for me as one of my least favourite words. Yeah, I think like, for all the reasons you've just said, Nick, I think the sound of the word is very negative and miserable and quite fearsome in some ways. But it's also just a lot of negative connotations to the meaning of it. Yeah, I agree. Okay, dread. Question number 3. What turns you on?
Openness, genuineness, intelligence.
Brilliant.
So it was openness.
Great answer, yeah.
Genuineness, other qualities you look for in a good therapist, I think.
Yeah.
That'd be one of the first things I would look for if I was going to see a therapist, is that openness and genuineness.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that's what, you know, I'm hoping that I really do feel like a human being in the room rather than just a professional or somebody who's doing a job. I feel like, not just in this room, but any room that I'm in, especially when I'm in the therapy room as well. I don't want to be the same, just like a fellow experiencer of this life, you know, and genuine. So sometimes I, you know, check in with my feelings and share that with the clients, and I'm hoping that that's useful with them.
Definitely, I think it is. I think it's a useful tool.
I think it can be a magic.
Definitely.
It's more than a technique, isn't it? A magic thing to share with a client. You know, acknowledging yourself and as you say, bringing that human element into the room can be so powerful in therapy. Really definitely. Fantastic. Okay. Question number 4. What turns you off?
What turns me off? I guess bitchiness, kind of conceit, closed-mindedness, judgment. I just said non-judgment before, things like that.
Okay.
And again, I think relating that to therapy, you know, you mentioned judgment at the last, sort of one of the biggest things about building relationships and in therapy is that non-judgmental approach, isn't it? So I could see how that fits into something.
Yeah, and you know, just being with somebody who I experienced that you know, maybe judgments, if I'm going to go with just that one, I guess, if it makes me feel uncomfortable, makes me itch.
No, definitely,
I
get that,
not a nice feeling.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Question number 5. What sound or noise do you love?
So well, I actually went for a walk the other evening, and the wind was blowing through kind of the corn, and I was like, lovely sound. So like nature sounds, like wind and rain on the window, and birds, but not starlings. The starlings are like like tweety birds.
Something about the sound, like natural sounds, isn't it? Sort of nature and just
gentle ones as well. Not like, because where I live, there's like a big group of starlings, like a load of teenagers, and they come and they but like then, you know, like the little tweety ones, little tweety bird noises, and the rain on the window is lovely, isn't it? Especially when you're all comfy in bed.
Yeah, the way I used rain is mine when I done mine.
Did you? Yeah.
I love the sound of rain when you walk and when you're outside. I just love the sound of the rain.
Thinking of Tina Turner now. Hear the rain on my window.
Are you going to give us a song? Or?
And it's interesting as well, everything that yourself, Nick, and you, Brian, have just named is all, as you said, Brian, the natural elements, you know, can be so powerful. Brilliant. Okay. Question number 6. What sound or noise do you hate?
You know, when cats are about to fight and they go
I
don't like that.
And their back goes up.
Yeah.
They hunch their back.
Yeah. And you know, it sounds like a baby kind of crying, or I don't really like that noise. Don't really like the dentist drill, or like the dentist.
That cat one is no, I think you said in the last episode, or you said before, when someone says something and it brings up a thought, but that cat noise, especially it always seems to be, from my experience, like early hours in the morning when you're asleep and the windows open, and it's woken me up a few times, and it's quite it's horrible.
It's like guttural, the noise, like
that's
horrible.
That's making me feel like that's horrible.
It's horrible, isn't it?
Move on to that question.
Okay, quick. Let's get out of that one. Question number 7. This is Brian's favourite question, by the way. It's probably mine as well, to be honest.
Okay.
What is your favourite swear word?
Twat.
Yes.
That was mine.
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
I'm copying yours now.
No, it's okay. Paul Naney was our guest on our first episode with guests. I think he copied all of my answers. I'm convinced.
I think he actually just looked and.
I think he cheated. So
No, it's interesting, isn't it? Though, in all seriousness, when the questions can really trigger quite emotive responses.
Yeah, that
and
last one with the cat was that was really strange. But
and it's funny with swear words as well, because, and we've had this conversation with between ourselves and with previous guests as well, Nick. Swear words can really tap into our emotions. You know what I mean? They can really, I suppose, if you'd be so inclined to, you could really learn a bit about yourself by what does it take for me to use a swear word, or what does it, if I use a swear word, is it a powerful emotion? And more often, particularly if it's your favourite swear word, it can be quite a you express it with a.
I quite like it because it can be a smack as well, can't it?
See, you're getting into this. The rationale. Brilliant. Okay.
Yeah.
Question number 8. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
So I wanted to be a teacher originally, and I think that's always something that I would have liked to do. I think I would have liked to teach. Yeah.
Teacher. Great. And question number 9. What profession other than your own would you... Excuse me, I'll ask that one again. Question number 9. What profession would you definitely not like to attempt?
Anything to do with heights. I hate flying. I mean, I came to the therapy shed for hypnotherapy, and Brian did do quite a good job of me getting to a Lanzarote on a plane. But anything that involves closed spaces and heights, probably not great for me. So flying or
window cleaner.
Pilot.
Even just thinking about being on, no.
Okay. And finally, Nick, question number 10. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say to you when you arrive at the pearly gates? Because I've got no particular beliefs, I think when you're dead, you're dead. Well, I think that surprised you, or well done, and definitely I'd like them to say, here's your mum, because my mum died when I was younger, so
good. Yeah, I like them questions.
They are great
like
questions.
like
Thank you very much for answering them as well, Nick.
It's
interesting icebreaker as well, aren't they?
They really are. They just I really do like.
We should do them again, on another episode, because I reckon our answers would.
They definitely would. Well, I know what my noise I hate now.
Yeah.
Like
You're definitely not getting a cat now, are you?
That's proper triggered me now.
Okay, well let's. Shall we move on swiftly?
Yes. So today's episode, we in the first series we done an episode on anxiety, and anxiety is such a huge topic, a big area, and we've done an overview, and one of the things that we mentioned in the overview of the anxiety episode we done was OCD, which again is in itself is a huge subject, which I'm sure we're going to find out throughout this episode. So what we thought would be really good for us was to ask a guest on who works a lot with OCD, and again, because it is such a big subject, do another overview but specifically on OCD, and I'd imagine probably what will happen, Nick, if you enjoy this experience, is that maybe you will come on again where we can do another episode and go a little bit more deeper, because I don't think we're going to cover everything in this one episode, but I do think having a little bit more in-depth knowledge of OCD and what it is, why it is, and maybe how to work with it would be really interesting, and I think somebody that listens to the podcast even suggested doing an episode on OCD as well. So so that's today's episode, isn't it?
Indeed. But before we get to that, Nick, would it be okay for just to get a bit of a... I mean, we're friends, of course. We know you a little bit, but just to get a bit more of an understanding of what brought you to therapy, you know, your backstory, what kind of, I guess, ignited your passion for coming into the world of mental health and therapy. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, so for me, I suffered with OCD, and I guess the place where that started for me, if we were to link it back, or we were to think about how people experience it, is maybe some childhood trauma, some sensitivity when I was younger and things like that, and overestimation of my responsibility to look after other people. That's kind of where it started for me. And then probably kind of coming into my teenage years, I watched a documentary on the TV. It was about this guy who'd killed loads of people, and I just was so shocked by it. I remember going to bed that night thinking, can't even believe that happens in this world, and then it somehow got turned to, well, what if I did that? What if I hurt somebody? What if I was responsible? And so kind of that put a halt to my plans of being a teacher and to do anything like that to help anybody. And then I kind of reduced a little bit over the years, and then I wanted to have children, and I had postnatal depression. So that was really difficult because I had to really face this fear full on. Just when my oldest was born, just in the hospital the first night when everybody went home, it was really hot, and I went by the window, and I had a mental image of throwing them out the window. Even upsets me thinking about it now. And then going home, and I couldn't cut their nails, and I had images of putting them in the washing machine. Really horrible things. So, you know, that really, I was distraught. And then, because it's such a thing, I guess, for me, pure OCD, it was about the shame attached to that. You know, all I wanted to do was be a good mum, and I was so ashamed of that. So I just read everything I could. Didn't go to therapy. Read every single book that I could ever get my hands on, and I just started to think, oh, okay, this is a real thing. This is in the world. It's not just me. So that really helped me. And even now, you know, I'm an advocate for books on prescription, books as part of therapy. It's so important, because the shame aspect of OCD, particularly for me and for people who've got thoughts that are culturally not appropriate, especially for a woman or a mum, or, you know, it's like it's unacceptable. So to be able to read that and see that other people who've experienced that is huge. So that I would definitely recommend anyone who's struggling with any type of unwanted thoughts would read up on it, because there's so much out there now. There's so much information out there. There wasn't 15 years ago. So
if you had one or two books to recommend, what would you recommend?
So the ones that really helped me was The Imp of the Mind, who was by Lee Bayer. It's exploring the silent epidemic of obsessive thoughts. Really good, and talks about the imp, like, you know, this kind of creature like OCD is like a bit of a monster kind of thing. Really good. And also White Bears and Other Unwanted Thoughts is a really good book, and that's by Daniel Wegner.
Right.
And he's an expert on intrusive thoughts. That was really good. So yeah, I guess I had to face my fears in order to look after my kids, and then my mum died, and lots of different things. And I would say that now I am recovered, but I am, I guess, analytical, obsessive person. You know, I want to make sure things are. See, the idea of people who are obsessive is they care too much and worry too much and think too much, which is me. So, and that's another thing, you know, I say now it's my superpower, or the thing that I'm proud of now.
Yeah.
I'm proud of that I have OCD. So it's
almost embracing it and trying to use the positives of rather than fighting against it, sort of embracing it as part of who you are.
Well, that is exactly how you get over OCD. You have to kind of accept the uncertainty, because to try and control certainty doesn't exist in this world, does it? You know, and if you try to control that and try to manage it, it just goes further and further away. So I guess what I've learned is, you know, to try and accept the uncertainty. I'm not saying that I'm not anxious anymore, because anxiety is normal, isn't it? You know,
100%.
Well, I do. I feel like, you know, getting over it has given me the tools to be able to help other people and help them understand and use thought processes to help themselves. When I say thought process, you know, like things like, I guess, mindfulness, really, because thought processes are just thoughts, aren't they? Yeah. Images, thoughts, things that are happening inside your head. They're not, doesn't mean that's who you are.
Yeah.
But, you know, what we teach, I guess, and what we, a huge part of therapy for me, I think, is to try and get clients to mindfully be aware of not having any judgment towards their thoughts, the thoughts being just like clouds in the background, you know. But of course, if it's your worst fear, the clouds, you know, sharks and a big time, wherever those worst fears are, it's really difficult not to grab onto them and run with them, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So how did you go from experiencing OCD to then getting into become a therapist? What were you doing? You know, you mentioned sort of after your teenage years, sort of the goal of being a teacher sort of went away. So what led from then to sort of becoming a therapist?
So I worked in the court service for 18 years, 19 years, and then I had my first son and then second son, and kind of in between my mum died, and I used to kind of go and visit her in the hospice, and I was there quite a lot, and I used to kind of chat to people and I guess help people, and I felt this, even when my mum was ill, I kind of felt this strength come into me, as in I thought, you know, I wanted to really be with her. I feel like death is one of those things where you're very isolated, and I really wanted to be with her. I wanted to help her in a way that maybe no one else could, and that sounds maybe like an ego thing, but I don't mean that. I wanted to really be with her, I wanted to give her everything that I could give her. So, and as I did, I guess I began to change and think that I've got something here, there's something that I'm able to do.
Just to be able to be present with somebody. Deeply
present, and like this kind of, sounds corny, but this kind of lioness feeling comes over me, and I do feel it sometimes with clients who really need to be held or to be with, you know, this feeling like I'm not going to run away from this, I'm going to be really here, and that's how I felt with my mum. So, and a couple of people said to me, oh, you know, you got something here, and I wasn't scared of the death thing, I guess. So but anyway, so then I went and done the level 1 and the level 2, and I was like, level 3, and then done the diploma, and then I did CBT, and then all these other things. So, and here I am. So.
And what comes to mind with all of that, the way you described that, was the saying, which is one of my favourite sayings when it comes to especially therapy, which is, when you can't look on the bright side, I will sit with you in the dark.
Yeah.
And there's something about that, holding somebody when they feel you know that they're at their worst point in their life, or you know whatever's going on for them is really, really, you know, bad for them, and they feel that they're in a really dark place. And sometimes in therapy it's about being able to just sit with that person in that moment, isn't it?
And it comes back to that word you mentioned just a minute ago, Nick, that acceptance as well. And it can be such a powerful process, that, can't it, you know, because I think, I suppose instinctively, for us, you know, when we're working with ourselves, but certainly when we're working with others, and particularly if it's your personal life, you know, you're sharing the story there, Nick, with your mum, is you want to rescue, you want to fix the problem, or you want to in some way alleviate a person's situation, if you know, their pain, shall we say, and that's not always, you know, possible, or that's not always the best approach to, you know, the most constructive approach to have. And just listening to you tell that story, and thanks so much for sharing that, Nick, because I think it was really powerful, certainly for myself, but hopefully for people listening as well. You know, it's that actually accepting the situation, because I think with the word acceptance sometimes it can be misinterpreted, shall we say, or misunderstood as you're just submitting. I think that's what I'm trying to say when where I'm going with that. acceptance can be misunderstood as a submission to you being powerless or useless or anything like that, and that's not the case at all, is it? You know, acceptance is, well, it comes back to that quote, Brian, that you've just shared there. It's actually, we mightn't be able to fix this problem in the way that we initially conceptualised the idea of fixing it, but if we can sit with the problem, and obviously then, and particularly if it's with somebody else, we can then begin to, you know.
I suppose acceptance, for me, there's acceptance where, I don't know if this is what you're trying to say, where accepting it, I'll just accept that's the way it is, or there's accepting it where then you then embrace it, and I think that's the difference.
Yeah, that's it, spot on.
And I think for me, for thinking about, there was a moment where me and my mum were sitting on the couch, and it was like a moment where I knew she was going to die. I think I must have been, because she died when I was 27, so it would have been about 25 at the time, and I remember that just this idea of, I just wanted to be deeply present with her while she was there, so not wanted to rescue or fix, although it did. You know, if I could have done anything to take it away, I would have, but I just wanted to just be with her, to share that with her, because so much of the pain, especially if we relate to the therapy as well, if you're really with the clients, you know, if you're really present with them, they don't feel in the dark maybe as much, they just feel aided by you but not rescued, which is how we help with their autonomy and confidence, and how we help with their being able to be their own therapist, being able to fix themselves, if that's the right word, fix, or find a pathway out the jungle or out the darkness, or and I think that is so important, because rather than just being kind of two separate people in the room, is to have this, you know, I often think of it like a toboggan, you know, to kind of be on the ride with them.
I love that analogy. It's a great analogy.
But you know, but we've got a different perspective. We you know, we share the client's view, but hopefully we've got a different perspective to help or to aid.
Definitely. I think that's really a good way of explaining how therapy can be, especially you know, that when you're describing that to me, that sounds very much a person-centered approach, which I apply to all my therapy anyway. But yeah, definitely. So did you, when you trained to be a therapist and you become a counselor, did you know that your main interest or area of work was going to be OCD, or did it just sort of develop?
So I guess I was always interested in wanting to help people with OCD, because I did think to myself, if somebody had just helped me on the brink at like 14 or 15, if someone was just there for me, things would have been so different for me. So that was always in the back of my mind, of wanting to help people with that. And I thought, just because of my experience, hopefully I was able to be maybe on that toboggan with them a little bit more closely, or a little bit kind of. So I guess I just started. Well, I mean, I started volunteering, and then I worked for Place to Be, and then I worked for all different places, and then I started my own private practice, Rainbow 17, in 2017, as the name suggests, and I just seemed to, I don't know, I seem to attract people who've got OCD. I put it down as something I was interested in, and I guess I had really good results, or the people had good results with me, and then obviously I'd done CBT, which, so the treatment for OCD, lots of acronyms in today, so obviously Obsessive Compulsive Disorder, and CBT is cognitive behavioural therapy, so the treatment for OCD is cognitive behavioural therapy, I guess, and so because I'd done that course, I was able to help in that way, and I was just really, really interested in helping people because of my experience.
Yeah, and I suppose when, I'm guessing, because I think I done a module on OCD when I was doing my CBT. So was it then that sort of, I don't know, ignited that sort of, so actually I know the model now to help with OCD?
Yeah, well, I would just remember because you know, I'd read every book I could find on it again and again, and you know, I've got underlined it and passageways and post-its on and everything like that. So I remember when they were teaching it, I was like, yeah. So I knew that, and that was helpful to be taught it as well. And so then maybe that was the most confident thing I had in my arsenal, to be able to help people, because I thought, well, that's the thing that I know from my experience.
Yeah. And I think it sounds like what you were able to do there was put the theory to the knowledge that you already have.
Yeah.
It's like linking them together, isn't it? Which you know, I think is good when you learn about therapy, because I think most people who go into therapy are interested in, even maybe without them knowing at first, but interested in just people, interested in connecting with people, and a lot of jobs that they've had prior are all about working with people. And when they start learning the knowledge, it's like, oh, I already sort of knew that, or I got that, but
it makes sense of things, does it? For you, I find, I agree, and I think that the psychoeducation, if you like, the understandings of the mind, and particularly when you get into, you know, like the world of OCD, I think is a great example of, as you say, Nick, when we start learning about how the mind tends to start playing out, and the relationship between thoughts and feelings and behaviours and so on, how that can become, I guess,
wonky, skew-if.
Brilliant. I was looking for a word there.
Messy.
Yeah, exactly.
Maladaptive, as we would say. Clinically, but and I think, you know, if I could just help one person, you know, I think, well, it's all been worthwhile. And when your life depends on getting better for your kids, and when your life depends on feeling okay, then, and I'll own this, I won't say you, I had no choice but to read everything that I knew on it, because I thought, and that's not going to be me. So and
okay.
So what in your opinion, or in your sort of knowledge, what is OCD? How would you describe what OCD is?
Well, in my words, I guess it's anything that includes obsessions, not just compulsions, because compulsions we think, so an obsession is something that you're constantly thinking about, you can't stop thinking about, it's probably unpleasant. And a compulsion is not necessarily just a behaviour, it can be thought neutralising, as well as, you know, the things that we've heard about, like washing your hands and things like that. But actually,
sorry Nick, sorry to interrupt. I'm just thinking thought neutralising. We just unpack that for a second. So what? If I'm thought neutralising, what would I be doing?
So say, for example, if you were thinking about worrying about contamination, and therefore you would go and do an actual compulsion, a behavioural compulsion, like washing your hands. That would be a physical behavioural compulsion. And that's the one we know about, isn't it? And however, if you thought a bad thought, if you thought about, I don't know, pushing someone out in front of a train or having a bad thought, you might kind of have a nice thought to counteract that, or you might try to think of numbers, or you might try to, doing things with your hands, but you might not necessarily doing something physically, but to try and neutralise that thought. You might have a good thought, or if say your obsession was religious stuff, maybe you would, if you, I don't know, had a thought about the devil or something, you think about Jesus, or, you know, something to counteract. So
try and find the opposite in some ways of the really intrusive thought.
Try and neutralise the bad thought in order, because I guess there's this idea as well as thinking you're a bad person because you had a bad thought, or thinking that you were, you know, unworthy, unlovable, unlikable because you just had a thought. And this is the idea about OCD, is people who worry too much, think too much, care too much, who've got OCD. And this is why I like to work with them, is because these people are really kind and nice and lovely people, and they've got this thing that's really stopping them from being themselves. And you know, this term that we use, which is ego dystonic, which is completely, if you've got OCD that is around X, whatever the theme is, that'll be the worst thing that you could have it about, because your fear about OCD wouldn't be my fear, it would be the worst thing for you. because what it goes looking for is your unconscious fears and your childhood fears and your deepest, darkest place where it's like,
thanks for sharing that, Nick, because when I work with OCD, it comes back. I find that can be such a key checkpoint, if you like, in the overall process, such a breakthrough, if I can use that word. It comes back to what you were saying before, Brian, starting to understand how the mind works, and actually reading books around different mental health issues, shall we say. We then start to learn a bit more about ourselves, and I think that's a key thing with clients, with particularly if they're struggling with OCD or traits of OCD, is that exactly what you've just described there. If you have a bad thought, does that mean you're a bad person? And sometimes I might say to a client, would you say to somebody else if they had a bad thought, like, I was walking my dog the other day and I thought, imagine I pushed my dog into the middle of the road and a car knocked them over, would you tell somebody else that, well, you're clearly an evil person for having that thought? And as you say, Nick, and I find that so often as well, the vast majority, if not everybody I've met who is really struggling with OCD, they're really kind, compassionate, caring, conscientious people, and it's because, partly I think it's because we care so much that we can be obviously vulnerable to OCD traits setting in.
Absolutely, and if you think about the unacceptability of uncertainty, it's easy to say. If you think about that, and somebody with OCD who looks for safety all the time and says that it's unacceptable, that there's any risk here whatsoever, you cannot live in a world where there's no risk at all. So, but the person who has got OCD would want that and chases that, and it's elusive. It's going down kind of a tunnel that you can never escape from. Wanting to get reassurance, wanting to have safety-seeking behaviours included, wanting to make sure that there's no risk, there's no evidence that you could do harm, or you could contaminate, or you could, this idea of magical thinking. If I don't do this, this will happen. I've got to be certain that this won't happen, but you can't be certain. That's the thing, you can't be certain.
Yeah, and I think, sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, most of us can tolerate that uncertainty, can't we? And we don't have, just somebody with OCD will grab onto that. I can't tolerate that, and just it manifests into a huge ball of anxiety.
Yeah, yeah, and I was just about to say about when you were saying about people with OCD, about the character traits of being like very kind, genuine people. What I find is, and this is one of the things I work with quite a lot when I first start working with people with OCD, is to give that back to themselves, to be kind to themselves, to be kind to themselves, and start practicing that sort of self-care, self-love, because they're able to give it to everybody else, but when it comes to applying it to themselves, because of their intrusive thoughts, because of the thoughts that they have, they find it really difficult to be kind to themselves.
Absolutely.
Definitely. I think that is can be a huge checkpoint breakthrough again, if you like, the idea of sharing terms such as intrusive thoughts. I mean, I don't know about yourself, Nick, but with clients sometimes you'll say, so intrusive thoughts, and they might say, oh, what's an intrusive thought? And that can be a really interesting thing, because sharing with the clients, the vast majority, if not all of us, the research shows, experience intrusive thoughts. The mind is capable of that, and all of us experience them. But with OCD, I think it's then, sorry, the first point I was going to make there was, when you share the term intrusive thoughts, so often a client will say, well, how would you do, what's an intrusive thought? And it's just having, again, it comes back to that self-care, doesn't it, right? Actually going, well, an intrusive thought, I've gotten the intrusive thought because I've experienced it. I haven't labelled it or understood it, shall we say, as an intrusive thought. I've immediately gone to the belief that, well, I'm a terrible person for having that thought. And how would you describe an intrusive thought?
Can I say something really quick? Just because, as we normally do, because we get so engrossed in what we're talking about, but I'm just wondering what might be helpful if we take it back to what is OCD, like how would you describe it?
I was getting a bit excited there, wasn't it? Sorry, Brian.
I was too.
Yeah, well, the DSM-5, or Diagnostical Statistical Manual, which doctors and psychologists use, would say that OCD is characterised by the presence of obsessions and or compulsions, and our obsessions are recurrent and persistent thoughts, urges or images that are experienced as intrusive and unwanted, whereas compulsions are repetitive behaviours or mental acts that an individual feels driven to perform in response to an obsession or according to rules that must be applied rigidly. There are subtypes, but there are so many of them, I guess. But OCD has now got its own category. It is an anxiety disorder, but it's got its own kind of category now. And I guess what I was saying just before about the fact that don't get too caught up on if you don't have the compulsions, because you could be thought neutralised. And just thinking about people listening to this who they might have the obsessions and the compulsions, but a compulsion it could be a thought neutralising technique that they're doing. So what I mean by that, they could be doing something in their own mind
rather than physical.
And the diagnosable criteria is to have 2 or more of these symptoms before you'd get diagnosed.
Okay.
So obsessions and compulsions, but doesn't mean to say if you're not hand washing or doing this or that it's not a compulsion, because you might be doing something in your head that is
cognitively.
Yeah, exactly.
So at what stage do you think somebody would access therapy, or at what point does OCD become
a disorder? I think if it's intruding in your life so much that you can't go about your daily business, or that it's doing something within your relationships, and therapy can be really, really useful, because I guess CBT is really, really useful for OCD, because it is about those thought processes, and it's really, really useful to be in front of somebody who's trained, and especially with OCD, I think if you're not with somebody who's trained or knows exactly what to do with this, it can kind of go a little bit awry. If say for example you to say, I've got the thoughts of harming somebody, or I've got thoughts of burning down the church or something, and it was an inexperienced therapist, and they go, you could land yourself into real trouble. So I think it's really important to make sure that you've got somebody who knows what they're talking about. Do you know what I mean?
Definitely. I've spoken to somebody before who was put off going to therapy or seeking help because they were having those intrusive thoughts around, I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something that they thought if they told somebody, they would get into trouble for. And obviously we had to, I gave that reassurance that, obviously I understand why you're coming, and I explained still around contracting and confidentiality and things like that, but also the understanding of, you're explaining why you're coming, and this is what's happening, so let's look at it.
Yeah, which is really good, because if somebody is coming with an obsession, and we just touched on intrusive thoughts before, of course you can't get rid of a bad thought, because the more you do, the closer it becomes. You can't actually thought neutralise, although you might try, because the loop that you create in your brain becomes stronger and stronger. Every time we avoid that kind of uncertainty, then it becomes that stronger link, and you cannot then undo that unless you have specific therapy. So if you went for treatment for that, and you then told somebody, I'm having these intrusive thoughts, like you said, kind of real culturally inappropriate intrusive thoughts, like harm to somebody's sexual thoughts, religious thoughts, anything like that. This has taken an awful lot for this person to say that to you, and for you to then go, oh, I don't know about that, or that's not okay, or for you to kind of have a face that's not okay. If you judge them even through your facial expressions, my husband always says he'd never take me to the poker table, so but for me, if somebody was to tell me about this, I would be hopefully just unconditional positive regard as to what it says, and I would just be open, and but it can be really damaging
as well, doesn't
it? To be with the wrong.
Of course, we've got to find a therapist that is works for you as well.
We say this quite a lot, don't we, on the podcast around it. It's so important about finding the right therapist for you. And if you're seeking a therapist, you know, ask them what their experience is. So if you have OCD and you seek a therapist, ask them what their understanding is. Ask them if they know how to work with OCD.
Absolutely. And you know, I often say to clients, you know, shop around, see how you feel. Don't just go with the first one. See if could I share anything with this man or this woman? Could I tell them, you know, about intimate details like it was tin of baked beans, as they used to say on my counselling course? It takes a little bit of time to be able to do that because you form a relationship, but you do have to have that at least feeling to begin with, don't you?
Definitely. 100%.
Otherwise,
100%.
It could be more damaging to the client, couldn't it?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Just to bring us back to when we were saying about what is OCD, and you shared the DSM kind of official line there, but I guess something that you mentioned earlier on as well, Nick, that was, I think, would be good for us to just touch on for a minute, is you said there's lots of subtypes of OCD, you know, and as Brian said at the beginning of the episode, it's such a broad area of mental health, OCD, you know, such a broad subject. Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
But you mentioned POCD earlier on in the episode. I was just wondering, could you explain that one for us? What's POCD?
It can stand for a couple of things. Paedophile or pure OCD, or so pure or pure OCD is when you just have the obsessional thoughts without any compulsions. But it's just to be aware as well that people may be having thought neutralisation or something going on, but pure obsession is just thinking about the thing all the time, so without the compulsions. I mean, even under the OCD title now, there's things like body dysmorphic disorders under there, and trichotillomania, you know, skin picking is under there. And so it's a huge subject, I guess, and there's so many things that I suppose when people say, I've heard people say I'm a bit OCD, and it can sound like it's I'm trying to think of the word. It's not
serious, maybe.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the word. Debilitating. You know, because you know what you mentioned earlier on about these intrusive thoughts. Everybody has odd thoughts, don't they? But the intrusive nature of the thoughts is when you can't accept that you could even have this thought, and it goes worse and worse and worse. And if you think about that as personality type or a person, you know, and they've got all of these intrusive thoughts day in, day out, all day and all night, you take you everywhere you go. You just can't escape from this. And as well, the idea of ego dystonic, it goes and looks for your childhood or unconscious fears. It is having to facing your worst fear every day, the thing that you fear the most, the thing that you don't want to, you know, whatever your worst fear is, that's what it goes looking for.
Right, okay.
That makes sense, you know.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
What your OCD would be is not yours, and that's why
it can be
so different for different people, you know.
So what is the difference? How would you describe the difference where somebody says, for example, I have to clean, I've got OCD because the house has to be clean all of the time, because if it doesn't, it stresses me out, or it really bothers me, compared to maybe somebody with actual diagnosed OCD. What's the difference?
Yeah. So, well, the obsessions and the compulsions, if you're obsessed about say the cleanliness of the house means that, you know, I don't know, somebody else is not going to get harmed, or this idea of magical thinking, but if you're just really, really clean and I hate to say it, a neat freak, then, you know, maybe that's just something else. You just, you know, are just anxious. But the obsessions and the compulsions, oftentimes the compulsions are a way of trying to neutralise or get rid of an obsessional thought. So you're having to do something compulsively to get rid of thinking something. So if the action that you're doing determines how you feel. So for example, if I was thinking, you know, if I don't tidy this house to the nth degree tonight, my mum is going to die, or if I don't do this, something's going to happen. That's
So
I think, sorry Brian.
So sorry, Mark, I was just going to say, so the difference maybe is somebody who will maybe say, I have OCD because I have to clean the house all the time, because if I don't I get really stressed or I get really frustrated. That could be more of they have generalised anxiety, or they have an anxiety rather than it being actual OCD.
Yeah, or, I mean, you know, a lot of people that are undiagnosed have got OCD. It could be that, but generally it's the compulsions to try and get rid of the obsessional thoughts.
Yes.
The compulsions are a way of trying to seek certainty, you know, to kind of reduce that fear, reduce the possibility that something could happen. You know, whether it's, a lot of people say to me, it just doesn't feel right, just doesn't, something about it just doesn't feel right, and that's very usual in OCD, is like this feeling, you know, this visceral body feeling of something just doesn't feel right, and you know, that's because kind of their spidey sense is pricked up, and they've got this physical feeling, and they want to subside that feeling, and again this idea of habituation,
Of course,
you know, of trying to settle down into that feeling. So if, for example, you are somebody who's worried about I don't know, killing all your family because you'd prepared a meal and you thought that it was contaminated or stuff like that, you know, cleaning everything, washing everything, and you know, to the point where you couldn't even maybe prepare any food anymore, or do this or do that, you know, and all the time you're kind of in this active mode, this activated mode. And then quite often, you know, it's like, I don't know if you've watched Jurassic Park, you know, where you see the T-Rex testing the fence, chinks in the fence, trying to test the fence to see whether or not they get electrocuted. OCD is a little bit like that. It goes and tests for weaknesses, so it may start off as one thing but it can jump to another. So if your particular theme is harm, then it might be there, or particular, whatever it is, it'll just go and test out that theory. Oh, is this a thing? So there's a real sense that it can move.
That absolutely,
that,
and that's really interesting that you say that, Nick, because when you were talking, I was just thinking so often, and this is something I found invaluable when I was training as a therapist, was that anxiety, particularly anxiety, and certainly when we're talking about OCD, are coping strategies and compulsions, shall we say. They don't stop at one thing. They will kind of, if you're to use maybe a common and maybe slightly stereotypical example for an OCD compulsion, checking the locks. I have to check the locks on every door and every window in the house. And if you do that at certain times of the day, and that quells my anxiety for a short time, but your OCD won't stop there.
No.
You'll have to then check them 3 times.
Yeah.
Then you'll check them in a certain order, and it tends to become more aggressive, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's just really, I thought that was really insightful what you were saying then around, it does move around, anxiety. Absolutely. It's a beast.
And you know, just one, every time you choose safety, you reinforce fear. Every time you choose the safe option and you add into that safety net, you know, you reinforce that pathway of fear. You know, okay, no, you know, that mistrust in self. Did I lock? No, I didn't lock it actually. You know, that profound kind of self-doubt, which is very, very common. And this is a huge element of OCD. You know, not trusting the self, not believing the self, not being confident, and one of the treatments is exposure and response prevention, ERP. So if you were to get that treatment, that would be about habituation, so being around that threat, being around that intolerance, and trying to increase the intolerance of those experiences so that the body became confident again. So that brain pathway was like, oh, okay, I'm okay. So the brain, what I say about the brain pathway, we're so anxious because we don't trust ourselves, we don't believe ourselves, we've got this profound self-doubt, and every time we do a safety-seeking behaviour, it increases the self-doubt every single time.
It validates it, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
We validate the problem by the coping strategy. I forget the exact words that you used then, but I thought it was brilliant kind of synopsis. You said the safety behaviour. What did you say? The safety behaviour is something about the obsession.
Every time you choose safety, you reinforce fear. Yeah.
That's it.
So,
you reinforce
every time,
fear.
yeah. And a lot of
I'm
people...
going to use that one. I'm stealing that, Nick.
Yeah. Well, every time that, you know, for exposure response prevention, which is the treatment, you know, if you're able to be aware of those safety-seeking behaviours, the people that collude with you, and to try and take them out the loop in order for you to do that. So, you know, to be around that perceived threat, to shut the door and be the last one out, to not check the cooker before you go into bed and stuff, and not ask for someone, can you check that for me? Could you do that for me? That's what increases that tolerance of uncertainty. Because, and that, if there's one thing that anyone can get from today, is that you cannot get certainty. That's the thing that generally people with OCD have got a overestimation of their responsibility for being able to sort stuff out, or maybe an overestimated responsibility at a younger age, therefore trauma, and for that reason maybe they can't tolerate it now. They can't tolerate that uncertainty. They want someone else to check it for them, someone else to do it for them, someone else to be there. And if you can, for the exposure response prevention treatment, you have to eliminate those safety seeking behaviours, otherwise they're void. You know, if you shut the door and you know somebody else is going to check it after you, then it's a experiment that it loses its potency, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's not doing what we actually needed to do in order to help us with the
strengthen
challenge.
To strengthen that pathway again. Sorry.
You're still feeding into that thought of, well, absolutely. I know somebody else has checked it, so therefore, although it might not be quite the same, it's still the same.
It's reassurance. Sorry, but just on that one, it's reassurance seeking in many ways. That, isn't it? Someone else is doing the checking for you, or you're seeking reassurance from somebody else that, the door's locked, or is the house clean, sort of thing. So again, it comes back to you reinforcing the fear by seeking that sort of safety. Sorry, Brian, I interrupted you then.
No, I was just going to say the thing that always interests me, or sort of comes up for me, is, and maybe you might be able to answer this, Nick, is where does the element of control come in? Because I think control for me is quite a big word that comes up for people I work with a lot of the time with OCD, either feeling a lack of control or the need to always be in control.
So when you've got control, there's certainty, isn't there? And if you feel as though you are, I guess, driving the bus or the ship or whatever, you feel as though you're the one at the helm and in charge, when actually the paradoxical nature of control is the more control you think you have, the less you do. So, you know, if you think about being on the roller coaster, you know, I guess what I say to clients is try and take your hands off the bar and just enjoy the ride. And everybody with OCD goes, what? They just cling on tighter and tighter and tighter to the point that they don't. The universe becomes tiny. They eliminate all fear, uncertainty, but actually, then there's no control. Yeah,
because that clinging on almost gives them a sense of control, but there is no control there, is there?
And that's the paradoxical nature of it, is that the harder that you try to cling on, the less freedom you do have, and that's the less freedom you kind of have in your own life. And you could probably write your ability to take risks or to do things on the postage stamp, because you can't. It becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, the things you can do, because actually can't take any risks anymore. And I say to people, you know, with exposure response prevention and habituation, what we want to do is, you know, if you think about when you were learning to swim, just start to paddle and take your feet off the floor of the swimming pool, maybe in the 5 foot depth, and just try and paddle. And just when you get out of your depth, just have a little go and then come back again. Don't jump into the 6 foot deep end. You know, don't do that straight away, because that's too much, and actually that's counterintuitive, and that won't benefit you long term. Do things, you know, at least 3 times a day, 3 hours a day. This idea of being able to habituate to a threat. The more you can habituate, the less potent it will be.
And I think that thing with about the control and the fear, an example I'll sort of always use, and sort of flying can be a good one, where somebody's is somebody who's maybe afraid of flying. Often it can be because they don't feel they're in control, because they're sitting in a seat belt on, somebody else is doing all the work type of thing. But that same person would, when you put it to them, would quite happily drive down the motorway at 80-90 miles an hour, thinking that they're perfectly safe because they feel that they're in control, but it's a perceived thought, isn't it? Because actually they can't control the other drivers, you know, they can only control the car to a certain point, where you think of a pilot of flying a plane who's had extensive training, who you know, a plane sort of double triple checks before it takes off, where you jump into your car and drive 100 miles an hour down the motorway, or 80 miles down the motorway, but you feel in control. But it's perceived, isn't it? And that's where the paradox comes in. And
yeah, absolutely. But I suppose I'm thinking about myself with OCD and thinking about my experience, and I'm thinking about how whenever there was a school trip and my kids had to go on a school trip, I think, oh, the bus driver, what if he's drunk, what if he's this, what if that, and for me the plane driver, what if this, what if that, what if that, what if that. So this is the imp of the mind of OCD, this is the bad thoughts, and this is the uncertainty, you know, that kind of like like the T-Rex testing the fence, but what if, not sure, what if, what this could happen, and it's never ending what if of possibilities or uncertainties, I guess, and that's the idea with somebody with, you know, OCD who just cannot tolerate that, you know, that uncertainty. So the control that they think they have, is, I guess, for some things useful, but actually all over their lives you've got to try and reduce that control, or reduce the sense of trying to exert control over things that you can't control, or at least know the difference.
Yeah, your perception.
And I think that's the difference, isn't it? When we said at the beginning of, when does OCD become a problem, or when should somebody maybe try and get help, is when it starts having a negative impact on your life, and it stops you from doing things, or it stops you, you know, for example, if you're a parent, it stops your children from going on a school trip, for example, because of those what ifs that you might have, even though you might not have any evidence to support them thoughts. And again, when I work with people, often one of the things we will do is look at, as a way of processing it, is look at what's fact and what's fiction. What are you basing this on? What evidence do you have? So for example, just the example you gave there about the bus driver on a school trip, what if he's drunk, what if he's this, what evidence have you got to say that he would be? What are you basing this on? What are you basing these thoughts on? Is it fact, or is it fiction? I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely, and that, there's a sheet we use, isn't it, putting thoughts on trial, or fact or fiction, and it is very much about, okay, your rational part of your brain needs to be reinforced and strengthened, because what you're using is this emotional processing kind of link a lot more than you need to. Yeah,
definitely.
So you mentioned ERP before, Nick, as well. I'm just thinking, like, treatment for OCD, you've mentioned quite a bit about CBT, but I think with ERP tasks as well, something that comes to mind for me is we're talking exposure and response prevention. And I think it's important as well to, I guess, for just to share, but certainly when we're working with clients, it's not just about, in fact, as you said, it's not about thought suppression or thought neutralisation. That tends to compound and reinforce the fear, but it's about learning new beliefs around the intrusive thought, or the fears that you have.
Absolutely, and not only beliefs. You know, there's this idea of, you know, mindfulness, which is Brian's, you know, an expert in. But we think about mindfulness and think about the skill to be able to kind of passively look at thoughts. You know, this is, you know, if you've got therapists who that's a huge part of the work for me. All of this, this work where we kind of attack thoughts, or we try to change processes and stuff like that. I don't really think you can do that unless you've got at least some self-awareness and some mindfulness, kind of, you know, being able to observe your thoughts as they're happening. It's not that easy. It's not that easy to teach people, is it? You know.
No, definitely not.
You know, I think about, you know, the way I describe it is, you know, if you imagine, I don't know if you've been to Blue Planet Aquarium.
Oh yes.
And you go right the way down. I'm not keen on things like that, me. But anyway, so you go right the way down. The deeper and deeper you go, and then you'll see maybe sharks swimming around, or big things swimming under the water and things like that. You know, now if you think those sharks or those fish could be your obsessions, those scary thoughts, and you could go, oh. and all you see is they swim past you, is the fear that you have. You could see their teeth, you could think about maybe mentalising blood coming out of their mouth, all those kind of things. However, if you're able to kind of see them in a different way and habituate and be mindful and not judge thoughts, you could start to see them as maybe the beautiful animals that they are. You could start to kind of go, I'm afraid of being in this place, rather than this is just going to crack and I'm going to drown. You could start to think of thoughts more passively rather than taking them and running with them, or just being able to see them passing by like clouds or...
Definitely, yeah, I think absolutely. And as you say, Brian's the mindfulness whiz in the therapy shed. But building up our relationships with our thoughts as well. And I mean, it comes back to what we were talking about earlier on. When you're working with clients, and particularly if they're struggling with OCD, just actually recognising that as a concept, that was certainly important for myself, in my training. Just recognising the idea of not every thought is a fact, not every thought do we act on, not every thought is important to us. So building up our awareness and then those relationships with our own thoughts, I think it can sound a little bit odd, maybe, if that's the right word. If you've never reflected on if you had that self-reflection, do you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean, because it's one of the hardest things that is, I guess, as a teaching element, the psychoeducation element that we teach our clients. It's one of the most difficult things to try and get somebody to do, isn't it? To try and think about what thoughts are and to meditate. And some people with anxiety can't stand to be still for a second and to have those thoughts going through. And this idea of thought action fusion, to think of something means it's actually happened. Just because you thought of something doesn't mean not only that you're a bad person, but because you thought of something, that it has happened, or it will happen, or that it's going to happen, and trying to come away from that or sit still is very difficult with our anxious clients. And we're saying to clients, we need to check in and stay with and be present and be mindful of and look at your worst fear here. And people want to run a mile from that. Of course they do, because that's what they've been trying to do for years before they come to see you. But that is the way out of the labyrinth, is to be able to...
No, go on,
That's the way out, is to be able to confront the thoughts and the fears, and just...
recognising them as what they are, if that's the way to describe it. Recognising them as thoughts, recognising our fears, rather than something that is, as you said, Brian, like a fact situation that we need to constantly be putting up safety barriers around. Again, it comes back to that mindfulness thing, doesn't it? It's just building up that relationship with, this is what I'm feeling, or this is what I'm thinking. This isn't necessarily my reality right now.
And when you do that, I find that when you face that fear, shall we say, that all of a sudden it becomes quite small.
Well, I was just thinking about if you've ever watched a horror movie. I don't like horror movies, but if you ever watched a horror movie and you've watched it repeatedly, like I'm not keen on Jaws, that's just the cello, but if you watch a horror movie repeatedly, I guess you've got less fear to the same response, and that's the idea of habituation, isn't it? That if it's something that comes on all the time, you're ready for the jump scare, you're ready for the Freddy Krueger, whatever it is, then your brain starts to learn that we don't need to get out of the way here. It's scary and it makes me jump, or it makes me a little bit afraid, but actually 2 feet on the ground, I'm safe. I'm okay, I don't need to escape. I don't need to... That threat system is not activated as much, because cognitively we know, oh, well, okay, it's kind of okay here. Especially if you choose to watch it, and this is what I say to clients. So if you're habituating to a threat, flooding, or if you're habituating to a certain thing and you choose to do that through therapy, through mindfully wanting to do it and given the tools and all of that, it's got a different response as well, hasn't it? So if you were still plonked somewhere and you wasn't ready and you wasn't prepared for something, you'd have a different response to if you were prepared and you went in
Yeah, that's definitely,
mentally prepared, or at least knowing that it was your choice, and I guess that's the difference.
Yeah, and I think I mean, to me that's with most things in therapy, isn't it? If people come because they're ready and they want to, then they're going to be able to get a lot more out of it, rather than them feeling they're being forced into it, or dragged,
definitely
kicking and screaming. And
so I mean, sorry, but I mean, you say like your worst fear was a 10-minute horror movie, say, and somebody put it on for you and on repeat to frighten you, you would get one response. But if you went okay and you had training or therapy to go, okay, you choose to watch that 3 times a day, you would have a different response to if it was played not in your choice. Does that make sense?
And with ERP, sorry, but I was just going to say, with ERP, that's crucial, isn't it? With exposure and response prevention tasks that we'd use in therapy, it's crucial that it has to be intentional. As you say, you would choose to do it. It's not just something that's kind of, well, I'll just wait for that situation to come along and then try and react differently. It has to be, as you say, Nick, you have to choose to do it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that again, it feeds into that bit of you're taking control there,
absolutely,
but it's in a controlled way that then allows you to expose yourself to whatever it is, knowing that at the end of it you're going to be or after the end of it you are safe, which is the ultimately underlying problem of not being safe, or something. And
just what they've had to overcome to get to that point is quite a lot. So if you go, right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to, rather than if you've been plonked and you just activated straight away, it's like, okay, you're mentally preparing just for that moment, aren't you? So
definitely.
No, that's good.
As we said, Brian, I really do feel this now as well. We could talk about this for hours. Thank you so much for coming in, Nick. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you this afternoon.
I hope it made sense. I didn't watch it.
You have
made lots of sense.
Yeah, it's been really enjoyable.
It's been fantastic. Just before we come to the end of the episode, can I just ask you if you could give us a bit of a summary, or a bit of an overview, shall we say, of when do you think a person should seek support if they feel, maybe if listeners to this podcast, or in general, when do you feel somebody who maybe feels like, I struggle with OCD, or what you've described today, I experienced that sort of thing, when would be a time for them to say, right, I need to go and actually look at this? Is there a time?
I think if the OCD, the D, is the disorder. If it's disorder in your life, if it's making your life disordered, it's making you kind of feel as though you're not able to manage things, then definitely to get help. But I mean, things like going on to OCD UK is a really good website on there. There's got so much clinical advice, as well as there's a forum. I'm a member of the forum. You can have a pseudonym, you can choose a pseudonym, so it doesn't have to be your own name, so you can say, I've got this intrusive, whatever it is. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be your name, you're anonymous. But also you can be a member and you can look at other people's experience on the forum, and there's lots of really good information on there. I would definitely say that just get some books on your specialty, your obsession. Just get some books, or look on YouTube. There's some brilliant videos on YouTube, not necessarily for treatment, but just to explain that this is a thing. Because the isolation and the shame that people feel with having this is part of what keeps it going.
So it's to normalise it, and it's to know that it's okay to have these thoughts, obsessions, compulsions. It's just about to make your life easier, to maybe learn how to change them. And I think you mentioned the word recovery before, just to recover from that.
And that there's hope. There is treatment out there, and there's hope. I think that's a really powerful thing you've just shared, Nick, that it can feel like a very lonely place.
Absolutely.
If you're really struggling. So definitely there is hope, and there is support out there.
And I think like Mark's just said, it's such a big subject that probably a part 2 would probably be really good if you're willing to come and have a chat to us again. But is there anything that you want to mention? Is there anything that you want to say that we haven't asked you, or you haven't said, or?
No, I think therapy is not the only choice as well. You know, if what we started to talk about earlier on is the intrusive thoughts or odd thoughts is something we all have. But just it's this idea of people who struggle with anxiety or uncertainty, who take the ball and run with it, you know. So it's about trying to keep it in check, to do the things, to understand it. There's so much out there. Just research what you need, and then if you do need to go to therapy, choose the right therapist, somebody that really knows what they're talking about. Because if you're saying something that, if you kind of, you know, really exposing yourself and making yourself so vulnerable, you need to have somebody who really knows.
Trust.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. That's all I would say. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
So just before we finish, we've been asking each of our guests, Nick, to essentially get Brian and I working. So to set us a bit of a weekly task that is around, should we say, self-care maybe, or just something that we might use in a therapy session, just for Brian and I to go away and we'll work on for this week, and then we're gonna share with the listeners and reflect back in our next episode. So sorry to put you on the spot, but is there anything you could maybe ask us that we could do and try out for a week and see how it works for us?
So I guess for both individually, to maybe think about something that you don't like to do, or that you do that has got to be a certain way, you know. I'm just thinking about, and we're talking about low level here. We're not really talking about something that you need to really, really worry about, but something that, so like for me, my husband puts the washing out on the line and it doesn't do it the right way, so I have to go to redo it, and things like that. So, you know, it's about that thing that you don't like is to just to leave it, or to do it that way yourself. So for example, put washing on skew if yourself. If you have to do something like shut the door, you know, to take a small risk and do it a different way, or if you've got a habit that doesn't make sense, so to do something. So because the idea,
this will be a good exercise for us to do. This intriguing.
So for example, the one that comes to my mind straight away, which, you know, like you said, was a low level, is I probably have a habit, or that where I like the volume to be on an even number.
Oh, do you?
When I do the TV, it's just something that
I do. I
really?
promise you that I do that as well.
So is what in the example you're given is if I like to have it on an even number, to maybe put it on an odd number and leave it, and then see how I feel.
Yeah, definitely.
Then sit with that feeling.
Sit with that feeling and do it on purpose and just be aware of it. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds.
I'd probably try and come up with a different one to that, but I definitely do that as well. Oh God, we were meant to be, you and me, Brian.
Well, I'm wondering, because the other one that I have is, I'm not sure where it comes from, but I like to count. So if I'm sitting here in like the therapy shed and you look at the ceiling, I've got all the slats, I'll often sit here and I'll count them all. Yeah, and I have to finish it.
Yeah, and that's the thing, you have to finish it.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll maybe leave it halfway.
Yeah, okay.
See how it feels.
So you can have the remote control volume on if you want, and I'll
that's going to be a challenge, that.
I might do both. Yeah. Thanks for that, Nick. I enjoyed that, really enjoyed that. And I think, definitely probably a part 2 might be good, if we can arrange it to come in, and maybe we'll delve a little bit deeper and maybe have some more examples and
get into the subtypes as well. Would be good.
Yeah.
That would be fantastic. But thank you so much for coming in, Nick. It's been a real pleasure. It's been incredibly enlightening. You know, it's been great to listen to you. So I hope you've enjoyed it as well.
I really have. I was quite nervous, but you put me at ease. It's really nice to be a bit hot now. But other than that, I'm okay. Yeah, good. Really great. And I do love listening to the therapy shed. I really do love it. It's doing a great job.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Very kind.
And I think on that note, that's a wrap.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Good. That was good. Enjoyed that. You okay?
Yeah. I hope it doesn't just waffle. That's how I felt like. I was just. Sometimes you lose it, don't you? Halfway through. I don't know about you. I do. I just kind of lose the train of thought, and then I go off on one.
No, you just get into that conversation, don't you? And
yeah.
It's so easy.